notifications. But before we begin the session, make sure to subscribe to our channel and also hit on the bell icon so that you will never miss an update from us.
So now first, why Azure? First of all, I wanted to state some facts because facts don't lie. And when you talk about facts, first thing is Microsoft Azure basically invest $1 billion into security research and development, and they have more than 3,500 security experts. So that basically means when you are using Azure, you can be assured that you are secure while using the cloud network. Second one is they have 100 plus services which you can use to build, deploy and manage applications on the cloud. They have variety of applications that we'll see later. And also 95% of all the Fortune 500 companies are using Azure for their business needs one way or another. Either they can have their complete architecture on Azure or they can use one or two services from Azure, and 95% of the top Fortune 500 companies are using it. So now, why Azure? First of all, this is the thing which everybody asks, that is Azure free? But to say that Azure is free for almost a year, that is few of the services are free for almost a year. There are other services which are always free. And also, if you want to basically look into expensive service, let's say an artificial intelligence tool or a ML tool or any tool which you want to use, so if that tool is expensive or you're going to use it for a long period, you can basically use the credit which is provided to you. If you're from India, you'll be given a credit of 13,300 and you can explore any Azure service you want within the first 30 days. One more is if you're from US, it's basically $100, and if you're from any country, just convert it from $100 and just add a little more, because it might vary, because $100 is not the same as 13,300 rupees. And also 12 months of popular free services. So all the popular services which are commonly used are given to you for free, but even in those services, only particular aspects or attributes of those services are given to you for free, but still it's free. You can basically learn everything on Azure without even have to basically pay for Azure. The first 1 month you don't have to pay anything. You can just use any service you want, learn every single service, and it'll be cancelled from the credit itself. And also there are other services which are always free, even that you can use. And what you can do with the free account, you can basically test and deploy enterprise applications. You can basically create mobile application and use the Azure tool to host your mobile applications, and also gain insights from the data which is getting into Azure, or the data which is already present in an Azure database or a data warehouse. So these are some things which I'm just showing you that what you can do with Azure. You can basically do a lot more than this. These are just basic examples. Now, I just wanted to give you a brief of what would the salary be for an Azure administrator. It would be $80,000 per annum in US, and it would be 6 lakhs per annum in India. And if you're an Azure architect, in that case, the US salary would be around $110,000 per annum, and in India, it would be around 7.5 lakhs per annum. Okay, so this is basically why Azure. Why should you choose Azure? So that's it. Now let's look at what exactly is Azure. So most of you would have gotten into this session having an idea about Azure, because this session is particularly on a certification which is Azure Fundamentals and AZ900 basically. So you would obviously have a little bit of idea of what this certification is about. So if you don't have, let me say that Azure is basically a cloud provider which is owned by Microsoft. They provide various services which you can basically get via internet. So now cloud is basically a term derived, or a term which basically contradicts internet. Cloud means internet, and cloud computing is internet computing, where you're getting computing services via internet. So that basically means you are a user who's trying to, let's say, launch a server, and you need that server to host your website. So now to do that, if you want to do it manually, you'll have to go buy a system or a laptop or a computer with the specifications you require, but that would cost a lot. You buy that, you set up all the software in the laptop or the PC. Once you do that, you basically put in your code, host your website using some a domain management tool. And once you do that, you basically have to manage the computer system. If it crashes, your website would be down. and basically when the traffic increases and your system cannot handle more users, in that case you'll have to buy more and more computers or servers. But while you're using Azure, you just have to mention the type or the type of server, the attributes, the components. So you just have to mention what you need. For example, let's say you need a Windows server with 16 GB of RAM and 100 GB of storage. So this is all you need for your software. So now you can just mention this, and let's say you need 3 servers, not just one. So you put all these details and just click on create servers, and Azure basically sets up everything and gives the access to log in into those servers to you. So you'll just have to use those credentials to log in into the server, and once you've logged in, you can basically set it up according to your needs. And also when you don't need, you can just delete off these servers and you don't have to pay for them anymore. So instead of buying a computer system for, let's say, 30,000 rupees, just a example, buying it and setting up, that would cost you a lot. But instead, if you're using Azure, as I told you, for the first month it's free. That money will be cancelled from the credit itself. And also they have 54 different regions. So basically they have data centers in 54 different regions. This basically helps. Let's say I'm in South India and I'm trying to host basically an application in India, and I've successfully done it. I've done it in South, Central and West India. So basically in all these 3 data centers. Now let's say my customer base is a little bit increasing in USA. So now I want to basically transfer or move my applications architecture to the USA data centers as well, so that my application could be running in India as well as in USA. So now how would you do that normally? If you have a company which is having a data center, in that case you'll have to set up a manual data center in US, which would cost you a lot. If you're using cloud, you can just basically migrate this architecture into the US data centers in whichever data center you want, and you can basically use that particular architecture to host your application in US. So it's pretty easy for you to take your application global, and it will be always available online, so you don't have to worry about downtime as well. Okay, so this is why and what is Azure. So now these are the things which you will have to be thorough. So the basics are the things which you'll have to be thorough when you're giving the AZ900 certification, because this is the most basic certification in Microsoft Azure. So now, first of all, the candidates for this exam should have foundational knowledge of cloud services and how these services are provided with Microsoft Azure. That basically means you will have to know what are cloud services, what are the cloud services provided by Microsoft Azure, and how does Microsoft Azure is providing those services. So you should know all of this. And also this exam is basically to begin with, it's just the foundation, and to begin with cloud-based solutions and services, or if you're new to Azure. So when you're new to Azure and you want to know all the basics, and if you want to be very thorough in your basics, you can basically take up the Microsoft Azure Fundamentals examination. Once you clear this examination, you will be given the certificate, Microsoft Certified Azure Fundamentals. That basically means you are certified in this particular category, or you are a certified AZ900. Basically, you're associate certified in Azure Fundamentals. So now you can basically move ahead with the next part of Azure. Either you can take architect, or you can take administrator, or you can take developer. Okay, so this is basically the outline of the certification. It is a foundational or a fundamental certification where you need to know all the basics of Azure, of how it works. So now, how much does this exam cost? And again, this varies according to the country. In US, it costs you 99 USD. In India, it costs you 3,696 rupees. In Germany, it costs you 99 euros. So it differs with the country. You can go ahead and check this out in the official site. Like if you want to check out for your country, you can go and check it out in the official site. So you'll just have to type in AZ900 certification, go to the first link and just come down. You will have this exact portal here. So you'll just have to click on the country and change the country and you'll get the value. So now, so what to learn to basically clear AZ900? So most of you would have come here to know what exactly you will have to learn. So let me give you a very brief and a clear understanding of what you'll have to do. First, cloud concepts. That is, what is cloud? Different deployment models, service models in cloud, how cloud exactly works and how does it provide these services via internet. How is cloud better than a traditional computing data center? And yeah, so all these basic concepts of cloud should be really thorough, and you should know everything about cloud computing in a very foundational level. Next, describe Azure core services. So there are some certain core services which Azure uses as its, let's say, underlying support. So there is Azure Virtual Machines, which is basically the most integral service in Azure. Then there is Azure Storage. There is Azure SQL databases, and there is Azure Identity and Access Management. So these are certain core services which are really important, and these are the first services which you will learn when you get into Azure. Whichever role, let's say administrator or developer or architect, whichever role you're trying to get into, these are first services. The core services are the first services you will learn. So you will have to be thorough with them. Next is describe core solutions and management tools on Azure. So this basically is solutions in the sense, let's say you're working in a company and there is a client who wants an architecture for let's say a blog. So they have a blog, and the blog is basically getting a lot of traffic recently, and they want to set up the website so that whenever there is traffic, then they should have more servers. Whenever there is less traffic, there shouldn't be any servers. So basically less number of servers. And so once they provide you those details, you should know how exactly to bring that solution into play. So to do that, you would obviously use certain tools on Azure. So you will also have to describe those solutions and management tools over there. For example, you have web apps. So there is something called web apps. Let's say if you don't want to work on the server manually, in that case, you can just develop your application's code and upload it to web apps. And web apps basically gets, let's say you upload it to GitHub and connect GitHub to web apps. Web apps basically gets the code from GitHub and hosts it automatically in a server. You don't have to do anything. You'll just have to write the code and link it with the web application. The web application basically does everything, provisioning the server, uploading your code, everything is done by Azure themselves. So these services are also need to be learned by you. So you don't have to have the exact practical knowledge of how you do it, but you should know what it is and how it works. So the entire thing is describe over here, right? So basically you should be able to describe, not show practically. So the foundational or the fundamental exam's complete role is to know that you have basic understanding of how Microsoft Azure works, not how or like whether you can create a complete architecture using Azure and host a complete application on that or not. So it's basically it's the most basic exam. You just have to describe or should know all these services. That's it. You should just know what are they and how they work. Coming to the next one, which is describe general security and network security features. So let's say when a client is trying to it's asking you that create a network for me, create a architecture for me where I can host my application, but my application has some really sensitive information, so that it has to be really secure. So right now you should basically incorporate all the security features and network security features which you know into that architecture, so that there is no unauthorized access. So again, there are certain tools to do this. The most basic is virtual network, where you will create a virtual network which isolates other virtual networks from communicating within it until you basically open it.
Just a quick info, guys. IntelliPad provides Microsoft Azure certification training in partnership with Microsoft, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
And next one is describe identity and governance, privacy and compliance features. So this basically is completely theory. You will have to describe certain features of Microsoft Azure. What are the privacy features? What are the governance features, compliance and identity features? So again, as this is completely theory, you can see it asks you to know 20 to 25%. So I'll get to you about what exactly is this percentage talking about. Finally, Azure cost management and service level agreements. So cost management is also important because a client would ask how much it would cost me to create this architecture, how much it would cost me per month or per year. So you'll have to know how it works. That's it. And service level agreements, every single service, every single Azure service has a service level agreement, which basically tells that this particular service will not go down for this amount of time. So let's say a service has an SLA of 99.9%. That basically means, let's say there are for 100 minutes, the service will only go down for 0.01 minute. So sorry, not 0.01 minute, 0.1 minutes of the entire time. So 99.9% of the time the website will be always running and it will never go down, and that is the promise which Azure gives to you through service level agreements. Again, this is completely theory and you should know all of it. So now coming to the percentages. So this percentage represents the number of questions from each concept you will get in the examination. So 20, 15, 10, 10, 20 to 10, or 25, 20, 15, 15, 25. So this is the percentage. It can be from 20 to 25. So let's say there are 100 questions. You will get 20 questions from cloud concepts, 15 from Azure services, and 10 from management and core solutions, 10 from general security and network security, 20 from identity governance, privacy and compliance, and 10 from Azure cost management. So I'm just giving you an example. So this is how it works. So if there are 100 questions, so 20% of the questions will be cloud concepts, that would be 20 questions, 15% would be Azure services, would be 15. So same pattern goes on for each and every topic provided over here. So now let me just give you a brief about all the services which you will be taught. So the first core service is virtual machine, then app service. So these two are really core services which you will require to learn. Virtual machine basically provides you servers. App service provides you a platform in which you can upload your code and it will automatically host your code in a server for you. And Azure Portal and Azure PowerShell are ways of accessing Azure, and obviously you should know how to access Azure before using it, so that is also required. Networking services, so as we know over here, general security and network security features. So VNet is the most basic of it. Under VNet there is so much of components, so many components you'll have to learn. So VNets are really important, or virtual networks are really important. Monitoring and management services, as I told you, even solutions and management tools on Azure are important. So Azure Monitor, Active Directory, and Azure Access Management is important. So let me just tell you why access management is important. So let's say there are 10 employees in your company, 5 are database admins and 5 are developers. So the database admins only require access to all the database services in Azure, and the developers require access to virtual machines, app services, and also databases. So now using access management, you can create these 10 users, put them into two different groups of one for database admins and one for developers, and give permissions to the group for the only services which they can access. That's it. So that they cannot access any other service and there won't be extra cost. So there won't be any extra cost. Also, there won't be any unauthorized access. And access management can be used on any user, and the administrator is the person who decides to give this. And other services like storage services and database services are also really core elements of Azure. So you should learn blob, file, table, and queues. And SQL database is also really important. So these are the core services over here. All of these actually are core services. Now coming over here, so this basically contains every single service. Not every single, they keep increasing the number of services each and every year, and sometimes even 6 months. So these are some services which will have to be thorough in. I'll just name the main title for them. So compute services are important, application platform services are important, security and management services are important. Not everyone, not every single service over here. For example, you don't need to know much about Azure Marketplace for the exam, or you don't need to know more about Azure B2C, and you don't need to basically know about intelligence tools or analytics and IoT tools, because these are not basic services, and these won't be asked in the AZ900 course. Uh, Okay, so you should know the basics about hybrid cloud because it will be asked, and data. Obviously, you should know about data services, SQL database, uh, table storage, Cosmos DB, and coming down, obviously, compute. So this compute service, you can basically know. You should know about container services and VM scale sets. These are fine. You can know about the basics about them, but over here you should obviously know about virtual machines. You should know everything about virtual machines, and also containers, and Azure Kubernetes is also not a very basic tool. You don't need to know everything about it. But in storage, you should know about all the storage services. Virtual network, you should know about virtual networks, load balancers, DNS, traffic manager, and all the basics about VPN gateway and app gateway. So this is just all the services which I just wanted to highlight to you, so that you will basically get an idea of what exactly to learn. Now coming to Azure 204 certification in developer career. So first of all, there is only one exam you'll have to clear to get this particular certification. So in Azure, if you want to become an Azure architect expert, so in that case you'll have to do two exams, 303 and 304. So in that case, there are two different exams. One is for design and one is for say technologies, architecture technology. So in this case, there is only one exam which you'll have to clear to get the Azure developer associate certification. So you'll be Microsoft certified, and yeah, so this is the only certification which you'll have to take up. And obviously taking up a certification is a big part of moving towards the developer career, because when you, let's say you have around 1 year of experience as a software developer or any field in IT, so you go to an Azure developer an interview, and they ask you whether you have any experience in Azure. But let's say your part in Azure was very less, you mainly concentrated on developing software. So now using the certification which you have taken up, you can tell that you have been working on improving your career and move towards an Azure based job role. So that's where the certification comes into play. So you can basically show the certification, and the interviewer will understand that you have put your work in, you have worked for these many days. That is an associate certification minimum requires 6 months of training. So that's what they expect, but you can basically finish it off in 1-2 months and clear the certification. So it basically shows that you have worked on Azure, practiced some hands-ons, did some projects on that. So according to that, you can basically get that job. And then the price also is provided here. So this, I just wanted to give you an idea about it. So if you're from the United States, it's $165. In India, it's 4,800 rupees. Sri Lanka, it's 80 USD. So this particular cost varies according to country. So go ahead to the certification board in certification website of Azure and check out the cost in your own country. Okay. Now coming to who is an Azure developer. So there are different job roles in Azure itself, as I told you. So what exactly does an Azure developer in particular do? So the Azure developer develops Azure compute solutions, develops for Azure storage, implements Azure security, monitor, troubleshooting, and optimizes your solutions, and connect and consume Azure services and third-party services. Let's say the main aim of an Azure developer is to create applications which can be hosted on the Azure architecture. So this particular person who's an Azure developer should know development as well as Azure. So combining these two comes an Azure developer. So basically an Azure developer should also know at least one high-level programming language. Only then they'll be able to create code, and that software and that code can be hosted on Azure. So the first thing is compute solutions, so virtual machines. There is web apps. So to host the application which you created, you obviously need this. Storage, and let's say your application needs some multimedia, and if a user is uploading their image, it should be stored somewhere, right? So that can be stored in Azure storage. And security, monitor, troubleshoot, and optimize Azure solutions. So basically security, monitoring, troubleshooting, and optimizing is needed for every single Azure service. They should be continuously monitored. All your Azure services and your application which is hosted on the Azure network should be secure, so that you should also know how to implement security in the Azure network. And finally, connect to and consume Azure services and third-party services. That is, you should know APIs. So you should be able to implement Azure with third-party services and also use third-party services in Azure architecture. So how will you do that? You'll be doing that using application programming interfaces. So the particular third-party APIs, you should know how to use that as well. So obviously that comes in your development part. And yeah, so that's what is an Azure developer. Both development and Azure skills combined makes an Azure developer. Okay, so now what I wanted to show you was some job descriptions in that particular Azure developer role. So you can see here, this is an application developer, Microsoft Cloud. So this basically is Azure. Coming down, so you can see here Azure development. So it's basically is Azure. That's what they're calling it, Microsoft Cloud. And this one is again an Azure developer. This is in Cognizant and this is in IBM. So let's look into some of the let's say interesting aspects of this. So first of all, they're asking you to have experience in Azure development and .NET programming, that is ASP.NET or C#. You should be either a .NET developer, ASP.NET developer, or a C# developer, or both. So that is very much important as an Azure developer because you're developing applications for the Microsoft Azure Cloud. Also, you should have worked on Azure development, but this is not that important as this is they're asking for 3 years of experience in both. So it can be a combined experience or a separate experience. That is, or you could have been a software developer for a year and then you would have moved to a company which uses cloud. So that is also that also can be done. Or you'll have to look into a role which asks for 2 years or 1 year of experience. Next comes relevant experience in web development. As I told you, you should be able to create web applications, that is any application. So .NET Core, ASP.NET, Entity Framework. So these are the development part. And Azure Web Apps is the platform as a service provided by Microsoft Azure Cloud, in which you can host your websites without having to basically provision servers. So you should obviously learn web apps as well. And relevant experience in Node.js, MeanStack, and AngularJS and React. So they're basically asking you to know front end, back end, MongoDB. So they're asking you to be a full stack developer as well as have all the skills for an Azure developer. Now coming to others, they're asking some concepts and the understanding of SQL databases and provide solutions, and as well as passion to work in startup environments. Okay, so these are some of the things which you'll have to know. So the main thing you look here, so they're asking you to know Azure development, they're asking you to know Azure web application. So they're giving you specific Azure services. So you should be very well thorough in these services as well as these parts of development, that is .NET programming, ASP.NET, MeanStack, and AngularJS and React. Now coming to the next job description. So that was a little more into programming. Now coming to this, you can see over here, you should be developing BI or DW applications, that is business intelligence or data warehousing applications in Microsoft Azure Cloud. So for this, they're asking you to know Hadoop, Spark, Hive, HBase. So you can use this. Basically, there is a tool called HT Insight in Azure. So obviously that you'll have to learn. So Azure HT Insight or Databricks. So you should know these services. Next, they are again asking you to learn Azure Data Factory, Event Hub, Azure SQL and Logic applications, Azure Storage, that is Blob Storage, Data Lake, Table Storage, and Cosmos DB. Good understanding of data modeling and database performance tuning. So if you are into the database domain and also want to become an Azure developer, again you have a role in that as well. So Azure developer or any Azure role is not very particular. You have to basically look into the job description, and if you're, let's say you're already into BI or data warehousing, in that case you can basically complete an Azure developer course and get the certification from by Microsoft Azure, and then you can just apply to these roles and get these jobs, because they're asking you to be able to develop BI applications or data warehousing applications, but also you should do that using Microsoft Azure Cloud Platform. So these two are completely different job roles, but they are for the same exact position, that is Azure developer, but they have different job descriptions. So this is what you'll have to look into while you're searching for your job. Okay, now coming to the services you'll have to learn. As I told you, first the main services you'll have to learn is Portal and Active Directory, and obviously multi-factor authentication is required, and also Key Vault. So these are for security purposes. And compute services, so I don't think these were asked. So web applications is required, API is required, API management is required, logic applications is required. And if you're using let's say if you're using it for mobile applications, this is also required. Also, developer services are required in this case. As your developer, as you're obviously a developer, so in this particular job role, they've asked for .NET programming, and for that Visual Studio is used, C Sharp, and for F Sharp or ASP.NET, Visual Studio is mostly used, and you have Azure SDKs. So using this, you can develop. For the second job role over here, they asked Blob, Data Lake, Table Storage, Cosmos DB, Azure SQL, Azure Logic Applications. Okay, so for that, you have HT Insight over here, you have Data Factory over here, and you have SQL Database, Data Warehouse, you have Document DB. So Document DB is basically Cosmos DB right now. Tables, and coming down over here, Blob Storage, Azure Files. There's also Table Storage, so this is basically table storage. And then what else? There are storage queues. So these two services are integral. So virtual machines are really integral to Azure. So obviously you should know that. So the services are very particular for different job roles. So you'll have to look into the job roles and start learning according to that. And then you'll have to apply to the job according to your skill sets. So if you're very confident in the first part, that is development part, then you should go for a job role like that. That is the IBM one. But if you're looking into a job which requires you to have skills on BI and data warehousing as well as Azure, then you can go for a job which is in the second role. But these two are not just the job roles. These are just two examples. There are so many different job roles which you can go ahead and check it out. Okay.
Just a quick info, guys. Very soon we are coming up with Azure Full Course live session taught by top industry experts. Do subscribe to our channel and hit on the bell icon to get notification. Thanks for watching.